Okay, welcome to another edition of Armed Citizens TV. My name is Marty Hayes, and I'm here with John Farnam today, and we are going to talk with you today about the new gun owner and what the new gun owner should do to prepare him or herself to be a functional member of the armed society. I was a new gun owner or gun carrier about 30 years ago, and I knew that I had to get some education real quick, and one of the pieces of education I sought out was John's book, The Street Smart Gun Book. And it was amazing the amount of material that was crammed into that little book that I took to heart and started basically practicing. After that, I ended up training with John a couple years later, and we've been friends and colleagues, and we've been training together for the last 30 years.
Yes.
So
I should point out that Marty went on to be very successful, and I'm still struggling, but
yeah, right, John. Anyway, the purpose of this video is to help educate that new gun owner. We got jillions of people buying their guns for the first time, and they're lost. They don't know what kind of holster to get. They don't know what to do. I guess a whole bunch of them just saying, screw it, I'm just going to open carry because, by God, it's legal in my state. And so we're going to discuss these issues. So, John, why don't you start out with talking about what the new gun owner should do when they first start looking about getting a gun and what they're going to need.
this is a subject that is very important to all of us. One thing we're seeing with all the new gun owners, people running out and buying guns for the first time in their lives. When I say buying guns, I mean buying guns for what we call serious purposes. People use guns for all kinds of reasons. There's collectors and there's recreational shooters and all that. Our concern is mostly with what we call the serious use of guns in personal protection. Sometimes we lament about the lack of information, about the ignorance that is so prevalent among particularly the media, politicians, and people who own guns. Sometimes it's not the fact there's not enough information. In our day and age, we actually have too much. The internet is filled with videos. You could watch videos for the next 13 lifetimes and never see them all. And there's some very good material. There's also some preposterous rubbish and sometimes dangerous rubbish on the internet. And people watch this. They don't know any better. They don't know what is authoritative and what isn't. And sometimes, as a result, they make bad mistakes. One thing we're seeing, if there's a symptom of this, we're seeing a rash of UDs now. UD is the term.
Yeah, what's a UD?
Yeah, UD stands for unintentional discharge. Sometimes you can use the term accidental discharge. Some people use the term negligent discharge, although negligence is a legal term and I'm not even sure I understand it completely, but UD is probably the catch-all. And people are having UDs in their homes. They're shooting their refrigerators, they're shooting their dryers, they're shooting their floor, and sometimes they're shooting themselves, by accident of course. And we're seeing a rash of this. A lot of this never reflects on statistics, but we're seeing a lot of it. I'm a deputy sheriff with Park County in Colorado, and we typically answer shots fired calls. And 9 times out of 10, a shots fired call is a UD. And we'll knock on the door, and the person comes to the door, and we say, listen, we've had reports of shots being fired here. And the guy says, yeah, like you shoved my refrigerator. Of course, it was an accident. He didn't intend to do that. And It is our honor and privilege in our age that we live in, that we've been, into which we've all been pitched, to use these wonderful killing machines that are the product of 6,000 years of rotten human history. And it is our honor to use the latest generation of killing machines. And I don't use that term apologetically. These guns are designed as a means of enhancing your ability to protect yourself. If that sounds, mealy-mouthed enough. Yeah, they're killing machines. And they are deadly weapons. They're designed to be deadly weapons. And I don't think it is possible to handle a deadly weapon safely. I don't think that's possible. I think we can handle them carefully. But no matter what routine you use, no matter whose manual you adhere to, no matter whose class you go to, no matter what video you watch, guarantees don't attach. You want guns in your life? Risk attaches to that. You don't want guns in your life? Risk attaches to that too. You don't get a risk-free life. However, we can teach people to handle guns carefully and correctly and greatly reduce the risk of having this person involved in the UD. We can also educate them on what our society, particularly our criminal justice system, expects, and indeed demands, of gun owners. Now, I don't know of any attorney general who publishes a manual. If you want to be a gun owner, here's what we expect of you. I've never seen a manual like that. Maybe there is one. But it exists, whether it exists or not. And one reason we like to educate our students with regard to what you can expect in the aftermath of a shooting in which you're involved, the news is mostly bad. Most of what is going to happen will not be pleasant. But you need to know this. You need to be inoculated, as it were. So when this stuff happens to you, both stuff that happens in our criminal justice system, not to mention emotional things that happen to you, not to mention psychosomatic sorts of things that happen, all this is perfectly normal. You have to know it. And when you know it, you can expect it and not become a victim of it. That is the mission that Marty took on when he created this organization, and why I'm so proud to be Marty's friend and so honored that he would ask me to sit on the board. And we are doing our best to help these new gun owners understand what they're taking on, what this involves. They go buy a gun, they know one thing, they know they're scared. They know that. They know very little else. And as a new gun owner, like the new owner of a car, you have to seek out authoritative knowledge. You have to seek out competent training. Now, I'm in a training business, so, with regard to full disclosure, I do this sort of thing. But among my colleagues and friends, there are many others who do this as well, or probably better than I do. You need to get into a class and start learning stuff. You need to join ACLDN and start reviewing these videos and understand what this decision of yours entails. And then you need to share this information with members of your family. Most of us don't live by ourselves. There's other members in your family who are going to be affected by the fact there's a gun in the house.
John, if I can interrupt for just
Yes.
a second. You said something about training, and most of the states require a person to get a concealed carry license and they have to have some training. Is that the type of training you're referring to, or does it go beyond the 4-hour concealed carry license course?
I've got to be very careful that I don't sound overly sarcastic or degrading. I think nearly any training is probably beneficial. But the training that's required by most states is absolutely minimal. And you have to understand, I could say terrible things about, you know, the people who, the states that require this, but the fact is, if a state required truly competent training, well, half the people would not be willing to invest the time in it, and they may not pass it. The state, by rote, has to have a training program that anyone can pass.
Yeah.
And so, basically, it's what we sometimes call a mirror test. When they hold a mirror in front of you and it fogs and you pass. Now, again, I'm waxing sarcastic here. I think the states do the best they can, but they understand that it's very limited. And as a new gun owner, the type of minimal training the state requires does not suffice to make you a competent gun owner and a competent operator. You need to go beyond that, and that's what we try to do at my colleagues and I try to do at ACLDN.
John, when I was teaching for the Firearms Academy of Seattle, I would tell the new gun owners, if people come into our basic introductory classes, to listen, society demands of our police officers that they receive at least 40 hours of hands-on competent training.
Yes.
Before they're allowed to go out and carry a gun in public.
Yes.
And the way society demands that is through their legislatures and through their criminal justice training commissions and such. But there's no demand for armed citizens to do that level of training, although the responsibilities are just as great or even greater.
And what an excellent point.
Yeah, and so what I tell people is, you can short circuit that 40 hours because half of it is administrative BS, but you're looking probably 20 or so hours minimum before you're really ready to start carrying that gun in public.
And even then,
Yeah.
You're just barely ready. But what an excellent point. We, in the police business, we hire people that have never been police officers before. We send them to academy. There's all kinds of things they have to learn. But with regard to firearms, when you become a police officer, suddenly you're, at least in my department, you're armed all the time. When you're on watch and off watch, you're never unarmed. You're carrying guns all the time. And you may get involved in a shooting when you're actually on watch, and you may get involved in a shooting at other times. With an armed citizen, most states, we're in Washington right now, in the state of Washington, concealed carry permits are not hard to get.
No,
You can,
very easy.
you can get one. To buy a gun, there's no training required at all. To purchase a gun, you can purchase a Glock 19. As long as you get by the NICS check, no training is required at all. When you apply for a concealed carry permit, there is a training requirement, but as we discussed, it's in most states you don't have to fire a gun at all. Mm-hmm. There's some kind of you attend some course and you have a certificate, and you present that, and they accept just about any. I don't think there's many they would not accept. Again, because they have to. They can't make it so difficult that people wouldn't be able to do it. So, but even 40 hours, is barely there. Most police departments, we require officers to come in several times a year and requalify and get re-educated and get updated and all that. Well, in the non-police world, there's no such requirement. Once you get your CCW, there's no ongoing training requirement. You just have it. So, in my department, when I have an officer who is having difficulty and has difficulty qualified, And every time qualification comes up, there seems to be some reason he can't make it, oh, yeah, I got that. Yeah, well, there's someone in my department that's going to say, look, Fred, we're going to go to the range. Well, no, I got my bare minimum. No, we don't want to hear it, Fred. We're going to the range, and we're going to practice. And we're going to get you through this. As a non-police officer, there's no one in your life to do that. There's no one to say, listen, we got to get to the range, we got to get to a competent trainer, and we've got to get some real knowledge and skills here. There's no one that's going to pressure you to do that. You need to pressure yourself.
Yeah.
You really need to pressure yourself to do that.
John, if we could segue into a different topic. You've got a philosophy called the stealth lifestyle. Yes. Could you take a few minutes as we wrap this video up to talk about that?
Of course. And again, I didn't invent any of this, as you know. It's a phrase I coined here some years ago about when we're educating gun owners. What sorts of things do I need to do? What sorts of changes do I need to make in my life and lifestyle which will make a lethal encounter less likely? Certainly not impossible, but less likely. We want to reduce risk. And one of those things is reducing your profile. We call it the stealth existence or the stealth lifestyle, where, as an example, you are, as I tell my students, the best time to prepare for your next shooting, which we hope never comes, but the best time to prepare is right now. When you're in the habit of sitting in a restaurant, for instance, and you're with friends, and you're having a discussion, and you say things like, if that guy ever shows up at my house, I'm going to shoot him. And you say that loud enough for people to hear, not just the people at your table, other people to hear. You're in the habit of doing that. That is not in your best interest. When you're involved in the shooting, do you suppose those people, everyone who heard that, are going to be subpoenaed? And you're going to be very sorry you ever said those things. And it's not just you blurted out that one time. It's a habit you have. You have this habit of making threatening comments because it makes you, feel strong and all that. Then you better not say that to me, by golly. That is a habit you better lose right now.
Yeah, I'm on social media a lot, and God, some of the stupid shit that people say, when they're talking about guns and deadly force and stuff.
And I guarantee you, when you're involved in a shooting, they will scour the social media. Stuff you said 20 years ago. There you are,
yep.
Right up there, and you're going to be so sorry you ever said those things. Or you gave that impression when you're talking that you have a very low opinion of human life and you would have no hesitation at all. And that is, the way your lawyer would put it, that is not in your best interest. Mm-hmm. So this is part of what we call the stealth lifestyle. Let's examine that. Let's look at the places you go, the people you associate with, the kinds of activities you get involved in, and see if that can be tweaked in such a way that maybe we can reduce your risk. On the other hand, I don't want to spend my entire life sitting in my room playing with myself.
Right.
I want to get out, I want to do things, I want to fall in love, I want to have a family, I want to get married, I want to have children, I want to do all the things that make life worthwhile. I understand that. And if you like to go skydiving, that's fine. If you like to race motorcycles, that's all fine. So long as you understand the risk that's inherent in that. You want to be one of us, you want to be an operator and carry a gun around, that's fine too. But when you make that decision, and then you like to go to, for instance, rock concerts, well, my advice would be, I think you better look at that twice. Mm-hmm. You really want to take that gun to a rock concert where there's drinking and highly emotional people. Maybe going to rock concerts is a risky thing to do to begin with, but particularly when you have a gun with you, yeah. I'm not sure that's such a good idea. Again, this is stuff you'd have to look at in advance. You're not going to avoid every bad thing that might ever happen to you. But I think we can reduce risk in ways like we just talked about, controlling the things you say, in many other ways. Basically, we have to be good people. Mm-hmm. We have to be good people. Not perfect, God knows. God knows we're not perfect. But we try to be good people. The law doesn't require you to be perfect. The law requires you to be reasonable.
Exactly. Yep.
Whatever that means. But I think we have to strive to be good people. Pleasant, polite people who don't precipitate the kinds of situations that might require gunfire.
Yeah, one of the things that I tell new gun owners is no one should ever know that you're armed. The
Absolutely.
gun should not be visible. It should be carried in a manner that no one knows that you're armed.
It's strictly need to know.
Yeah.
This is not something when you're armed, you go armed as we all do. Out of sight, out of conversation. There's no way in normal conversation anyone would come to the conclusion that we're armed. And that's the way it should be. They don't need to know. And there are people out there, if they knew you were armed, they might try to precipitate something. Well, I would not want that to happen. Our good, friend and colleague, Andrew Baraka, as you know.
Law of self-defense.
Yes, who's...
does a great job.
He is a wonderful friend and a great contributor to our art. And he condenses it down to 5, what he calls the 5 pillars. And you're probably familiar with it, but if you're not, it's innocence, imminence, proportionality, reasonableness, and the last is avoidance. Mm-hmm. And I am absolutely convinced that is the most important of the 5. We have a number of cases I'm involved in right now where what the defendant did in the few seconds he had was probably reasonable. But what the jury is going to be asking is, what investigators are going to be asking, what judges are going to be asking is, what in the world were you doing there? Mm-hmm. Why were you there with those people at that time, under these circumstances? A good and reasonable person probably would not want to be there. And that has been the deciding factor in many cases I've been involved in. We have prosecutors out there now who think that by virtue of the fact you can carry a gun means you're looking for a fight.
Right.
And they're looking for ways that they can make that case, and you just can't give it to them. We have a case recently where, we have all these riots last summer, mm-hmm. and people would come to the riot. In one case, the person had an M4. He comes to the riot, and sure enough, he gets involved in the fatal shooting. And once again, under the circumstances, it may have been completely reasonable. But what is the jury going to want to know? Yeah. What in the world were you doing there? What kind of smart, reasonable person goes to riots carrying an M4? And so that's kind of a extreme example. But when we go armed, we have to be careful about the places we go, the people we associate with.
Of course, then there's the issue about drinking.
Oh boy!
I'll bet you a few cases involve somebody with alcohol.
And this is, ethyl alcohol has been part of our civilization for many thousands of years, and it's not going away. Some of the more modern drugs that I can't even pronounce are more recent, but ethyl alcohol has been around for a long time. And the best advice I can probably give gun owners, and particularly gun carriers, is don't drink. Well, yeah, that sounds all fine, but that's not practical. For many of us, enjoying a cocktail, after dinner is something that we do. And I don't think, what percentage of people who drink become alcoholics?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's probably 1%, 2%, 3%. I don't know. Pick a
Not a
number.
great percentage.
But the vast majority of people who enjoy alcoholic beverages now and then are not alcoholics and are not problem drinkers and never become one. And so now you're involved in a shooting. What are the chances that you're going to get a breath test? About 100%. Yeah, you're going to get a breath test or a blood test or whatever. And when you blow anything but a 0-0, I think it's safe to say it won't be helpful.
Yeah, in fact, one of my things that I would plan on doing if I wasn't ever involved in a shooting is I would ask to have a breath test done.
Yes.
I want to exclude the fact that
I blew a 0-0, yeah. I would insist on it.
Because I've seen cases where they make out that the person had been drinking and they hadn't.
And they just tried to bait that to see if they'd get anything out of it, yeah. No, I probably would too. But so, okay, I enjoy a cocktail now and then. Say that describes you. My suggestion is have a cocktail and then go to bed. Make that the last thing you do during the day. Have your cocktail and then go to bed so you're not doing it. You're not out doing stuff. You're sure not driving. You have a cocktail and then go to bed. You don't have to give up drinking, but you sure have to understand that when you're carrying a gun, you have to blow a 0-0. I don't think there's any doubt.
It has been decades since I have gone into a bar and had a drink.
Yeah.
Because I'm always armed.
Yep.
And even if it wasn't illegal, and in fact, a lot of cases not illegal to have a gun in the bar, you just can't be drunk with a gun.
Right.
But I just avoid it. I don't want to be around those people. I don't want to be around drunks.
I don't either.
I don't want to be accused of having been drunk. And I just don't go.
And that's probably, it's a decision you made, and probably a sound decision. Although when you go to a typical Outback or Olive Garden or any one of these franchises, they all have bars. You don't even have to sit at the bar, but there's a bar there, and there are people drinking. So when you go out to dinner some night, you're going to be at a restaurant where you could order a drink if you wanted. We're carrying guns, so, we don't. But you're going to be around it, and you just have to be conscious. It would be very cavalier for me to say, stop drinking and just become a teetotaler. That all sounds fine, but for most of us, it's not practical. You have to, like everything else you do, all your other habits, you have to gather this in and tweak it as necessary. I'm going armed now, and so I need to do what I need to do to best observe my best interest. I guess I'll put it that way.
Yeah, we're going to wrap this up, but before we go, can you just discuss a little bit about the new concept of open carry? It's sweeping the nation, and let's talk about that for just a minute.
Okay. Typically, when someone brings up a subject, I say, okay, well, it has pros and cons. Here are the strengths and here are the weaknesses. This is an exception. Open carry is absolutely stupid. I can't imagine how that would be in your best interest to carry a gun openly in normal society. Maybe when you're hunting or something like that, where everybody else is, that's one thing. But when you go into a typical restaurant or what's going to happen? You're going to spend your entire day talking with police. Now, whether it's legal or not, I think is almost irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The people who do this generally are doing it because they want to make a statement or they want to make some kind of political sort of point somewhere. That certainly doesn't describe me. I describe the self-existence, but for the average person to carry a weapon that's plainly visible, absolutely stupid, not in your best interest. I don't know an attorney you could talk to who would think that was a good idea.
But the only time I ever open carry is in the middle of the lake on my boat. I'll take my shirt off.
Yeah, you're right. Or
when I get back to the dock, though, the shirt covers the gun.
Absolutely. Again, No one has to know you're armed.
Yeah.
That is just not anything anybody needs to know. Nothing you talk about. Nothing you'd have in plain sight. When I do courses in certain states where you can't get a concealed carry permit, there are certain states where it's not going to happen. I have state troopers come in to lecture the class. And I can tell you what they say. The state trooper will say something like this. Look, you want to carry a gun? Go ahead. It's not strictly legal, but as long as we don't see it and you don't talk about it, we don't care. We don't care unless you fail the attitude test, unless you look like a freak, or do something else to call attention to yourself. You're a good and reasonable person. You've got a concealed gun that we don't know about. We don't care.
How are they going to care if they don't know about it?
Right. So I think they're being starkly honest when they say that. The people who get in trouble in those states, the people who bring it up. You know, I got a gun. You want to see it? I sure don't. But again, that's just ignorance, and that's people who don't know any better.
There are many states, though, where the law enforcement always ask on a contact, do you have any guns in the car? Are you armed?
Right. There are some states where when you have a concealed carry permit, you are required to inform the officer. Of course, they don't tell you how to do that. My suggestion is, when you're around police, don't use the word gun.
Yep.
When you're around police, don't say gun, shooting, hand grenade, don't use any of those words. I think the best way to fulfill that legal obligation, when you live in a state where that is an obligation, is to say something like, officers, I have a permit, would you like to see it? Or something like that.
I always just hand them my driver's license and my concealed carry license and don't say a word. They'll figure it out.
And that's probably a good tactic. Yeah. When you're in other states, I can tell you, at the state level, we can't tell. We can't keep track of what state's on or other states, and nor do we care. My deputies, I don't think have ever seen a Washington state carry permit, and when they looked at yours, they would say, Washington, that was good to me. I don't think, unless what? Unless you look like a freak, or you're doing something stupid, or you fail the attitude test. Then you're going to make a mess for yourself, and no one's going to feel very sorry for you. That's something else. You want to be one of us and go armed? Watch what comes out of your mouth. You'll be a pleasant person.
Yeah, one of the caveats of the Armed Citizens Network is that we're not going to help you justify an illegal act of carrying a gun. If you're going to do that, you're on your own.
Right.
We can't, in good conscience, precipitate or help people break the law. And so, if you're involved in a shooting and you've been carrying a gun illegally, you can count on not getting any help from the network. We just can't do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. But, a lot of people believe they have no choice. And they make decisions, and I'm not going to tell them they're wrong.
Yeah.
But whether the network's involved or not, all of us need to look at where we go, whom we associated with, and see if we can reduce our exposure, reduce our risk, and concentrate on being a good person.
Well, shall we wrap this up? I think we've covered quite a bit of material here, and thank you, John, for taking a few minutes and sitting down with us today.
Well, you're welcome, and I hope I said something that might be helpful.
Well, if nothing else, entertaining.
Yeah. We're in show business, aren't we?
Thanks, everybody, for viewing, and as we were discussing this, I had a thought, maybe we should produce a gun safety video as part of this series.
Yes.
And so you can stay tuned for that coming up here one of these days or weeks or months.
If I haven't managed to bore you to death so far, you'll see more of it.
Okay. Thank you, John.